When I asked Robert why he made a family card for his in-laws without discussing it with me, he laughed and said, "They're my family, so they should have a family card. Do you have a problem with that? If you knew who helped you when you were all alone, you wouldn't say such things." I was shocked by his arrogant tone, which I'd never heard before. Was Robert always like this? He continued, "If you're grateful, you should do more for my family. Then I'll consider you part of the family. Until then, it's like you're on a trial period in our marriage." I had never heard of such a thing as a trial period in marriage. Seeing me silent, Robert pushed further, saying, "In other words, you're not yet a full member of the family. If you don't like it, you can leave anytime. For now, our family is just the 5 of us without any useless people around." Understood? After hearing this, I immediately canceled all our joint credit cards and moved out. My name is Emily Wilder. I'm 27 years old and a freelance illustrator. I used to work as a designer for a major advertising agency, but I became independent 2 years ago when I got married and now work from home. My parents died in an accident when I was young, so I was raised by my maternal grandparents. When I went to college, I moved back to the apartment near the city center where I had lived with my parents and have been there ever since. I met my husband, Robert, at an Italian restaurant where he worked. It was a nice place with good food and reasonable prices, so my colleagues and I often visited. Robert, the handsome waiter, became a popular topic of conversation. The manager once joked that many regular customers came because of Robert, and it was easy to see why. I won't deny that I became one of Robert's fans because I thought he was cool. Somehow, we quickly grew closer, and before I knew it, we were being called a couple. To my surprise, we ended up getting married. I don't remember much about that time. It felt like I was in a daze. When I finally realized what was happening, there was a man beside me whom I was calling my husband. Despite everything, I loved Robert back then and was happy to be married. I quit my job as a designer at a company and started working as a freelancer. It was a smooth transition as I continued working on the same projects but now on a freelance basis. Robert kept working at the Italian restaurant with his shifts varying daily and sometimes going late into the night. It became a bit challenging for me to maintain my usual work routine, and since I'd always wanted to go independent, I decided to take the plunge. Robert encouraged me, saying, "It's a good idea, Emily. It'll be easy, and you can keep doing what you love." So we started our married life together. Neither of us liked flashy things, so we decided not to have a wedding ceremony and just register our marriage. We also met each other's families for a brief greeting. Robert continued working while I worked from home and took care of household chores. Our schedules were irregular, but we kept in touch and waited for each other to come home for meals. It was a happy and enjoyable daily life, and I thought, marriage is nice. However, about a year after getting married, Robert said something that changed everything. "My family wants to come over, is that okay?" he asked. Of course, I said it was fine, thinking it would be a chance to get to know them better as I'd only met them briefly during our initial greeting. Having lost my parents at a young age, I had always admired Robert's large family. But when his family of 4 arrived, I was left speechless. His sister, as soon as she entered our house, asked, "Hey, which room is mine?" Robert's sister, 32 years old, was 5 years older than Robert and me, and I had heard she worked at a local supermarket. I was shocked by how rude Robert's older sister was, so different from the polite way she had acted when we first met. Robert's 18-year-old sister was also there, but she didn't say a word and just stood silently. I remember she was very quiet during our first meeting, too. Prompted by Robert's older sister, I showed the 2 sisters to the guest room and Robert's parents to what used to be my parents' room. It was the only Japanese-style room in the apartment, so I thought it would be best for them. After they settled into their rooms, Robert's older sister suddenly said, "Well, since we're going to be living here together, you better start serving our family properly." I was confused by what she meant. When I looked at Robert for help, he was laughing in a way I had never seen before. It turned out that his family had given up their home and moved into my apartment without telling me. "Sorry," Robert explained. "Apparently, our family home suddenly had to be vacated, and they had nowhere else to go. I wish she had told me earlier, as I had assumed they were only staying for a day or 2. This was really inconvenient." When I mentioned my concerns to Robert, trying not to upset him, he looked down and apologized, saying, "Please, just until they find somewhere else to go." I felt I couldn't say no. How could I turn away people in need, especially Robert's family, who had no place to go? So, I reluctantly agreed to let them stay, but only on the condition that they find a new place as soon as possible. However, I soon regretted this decision. Robert's family showed no consideration at all. From the day they moved in, they did nothing and left everything to me, saying whatever they wanted. They made no effort to find a house or jobs. When I asked about their jobs, I was in for another shock. Robert's older sister said, "Oh, I quit that lousy supermarket job." I had thought she was a full-time employee because of her age, but she revealed she had only been working part-time and hadn't had a steady job since high school. Robert's parents also had part-time jobs but had quit before coming here. And, of course, Robert's younger sister wasn't working either. She had claimed to be a student, but that was a lie. When I asked why she wasn't working, she said, "Why should I work when I've become part of a wealthy family?" A wealthy family? Who was she talking about? I asked, and the answer shocked me again. "You, of course," she said. "You got a big settlement and insurance money from your parents' accident, and you don't even have a mortgage on this apartment. You can live without working." She laughed as she said this. When Robert got home, I protested, but he raised his voice at me in a way I had never seen before. "Everyone's tired from suddenly having to leave their home," Robert said. "Let them rest for a while, or do you want to cruelly kick out my family, Emily?" I was stunned and froze. Then Robert softened his tone and said, "Sorry for yelling. I'm having a tough time too. I've been busy and tired today. Can you understand? Just a little more patience, please." Robert was good at handling people, especially women. Looking back, he probably used a mix of kindness and harshness to get what he wanted. But at that moment, I didn't realize it and reluctantly agreed to endure a little longer. The situation with Robert's family got worse. They treated me like a servant at home and demanded money when they went out. "We can't go job hunting without any money, can we?" they said. They promised to find work but kept living with us, claiming they couldn't find jobs. I reluctantly gave them some money, which they spent without actually looking for work. If I accused them of not searching for jobs, they would deny it and make me out to be the liar. Robert's whole family would then blame me for hours. Telling Robert didn't help either. He would say, "Everyone's frustrated about not finding jobs. Sorry, just bear with it a little longer. I'll talk to them." But as time went on, I felt like saying anything was pointless. However, they started asking for money less frequently, which gave me a small sense of relief. Robert must have said something, as the issue seemed to resolve itself. Of course, the money I had given them was never returned. Then after about 3 months of living this way, I noticed something alarming. Why is the credit card bill so high? I wondered if there could be unauthorized use. When I quickly checked the statement, I found that all the charges were made with our family credit cards. The purchases ranged from food and drinks to books, games, and even expensive brand bags and clothes. Each item was labeled with a number from 1 to 5, indicating that 5 family credit cards had been issued. Currently, these credit cards were in my name with Robert using the family cards. He had said, "You'd be better at handling this, and it's more convenient to consolidate payments, right? Can I leave it to you?" So I ended up managing them, but it seemed these family cards had been issued without my knowledge. Robert's family stopped asking for money because they could now make credit card payments and cash withdrawals. When I confronted Robert about why he made family cards for his in-laws without asking me, he laughed and said, "Well, you complain when they say they have no money, so what choice do I have? Besides, you know who took you in when you were all alone, right? Can you really say such things to the important family of your benefactor?" I was stunned into silence by his arrogant tone, unlike anything I had heard from him before. I had never heard Robert speak like this before. Was he always this way? He said, "If you're grateful, you should serve my family more. Then I'll acknowledge you as family too. Until then, consider it like you're on a provisional license." I had never heard of a provisional phase in marriage. Seeing me silent, Robert pressed further. "This means you're not yet an official family member. If you don't like it, you can leave anytime. Right now, it's just the 5 of us in our family. Useless parasites get out." That's when I realized Robert's true nature. I felt as if all the blood had drained from my body. Shocked, I started thinking about divorcing Robert. In fact, I began to wonder why I married him in the first place. Initially, I just thought Robert was a handsome guy like the other girls. I was just excited about him being good-looking without any particular intent. Then, one time when I left to go to the restroom, Robert approached me and said, "You seem different from other people, Emily." I don't know how to put it. Mystical. Sorry, it's not something I should say to a customer. I was taken aback by his words, and over time, I started to notice Robert more. Maybe that was his strategy to make me like him. Thinking about it calmly, it started to make sense. I remember when Robert came to our table for small talk, a colleague jokingly said I was a wealthy girl living alone in a condo. It was right after that he started talking to me. He was probably after my wealth and this condo. Robert wasn't really my type. To put it nicely, he was modern. To put it bluntly, he seemed somewhat frivolous. I liked mature men who could talk quietly and seriously, but I ended up falling for Robert. I always found that strange. Robert was the so-called handsome guy, and it must have been easy for him to charm a woman, especially someone like me, not used to men and new to the workforce. I fell for his tactics and ended up marrying him. The thought made me so frustrated and embarrassed that I felt like destroying everything in the house, but I wasn't foolish enough to act on that impulse. Driven by a desire for revenge, I decided to endure this situation a little longer. Just as Robert had manipulated me, I planned to control his entire family. The condo we lived in had been bought by my father with a mortgage soon after I was born. It wasn't very expensive back then, but the area had developed rapidly, with a new shopping center nearby, making it a luxury condo now. My parents, hoping for more children, had bought a spacious condo, which is why there's enough room even with Robert's family moving in. But even with its decent size, having Robert's family around was a nuisance for me, especially since I worked from home. I was enduring this only for the sake of revenge. As Robert's sister had said, there was no mortgage payment for this condo. When I was 3, both of my parents passed away in a car accident. They died on their way back from my paternal grandfather's funeral after colliding with a speeding car on the freeway. I was supposed to go with them that day, but I had caught the flu and had a high fever, so my maternal grandparents came to take care of me, leaving me as the only one who survived. The mortgage payments were covered by group credit life insurance, so the only housing costs I had to pay were the management fees and property taxes. When Robert saw the amount, he said he would contribute just a bit more than that to our household expenses. There's no mortgage, so if I put in that much, we should manage with Emily's income, right? We'll each use our own earnings for personal expenses. Sounds good, doesn't it? I agreed, thinking maybe he was right. Until then, I had been paying for everything by myself, so I thought his contribution would lighten my load. Looking back, it was foolish, but at the time, I was blinded by my love for Robert and just went along with whatever he said. Robert probably thought he was the head of the household and the one supporting me, which is why he could so easily call me a parasite. But in reality, things were different. I paid for most of the expenses like utilities, food, social activities, and entertainment, and now, with 5 real parasites added to my household, it had become impossible to manage with just that amount. I wanted to get rid of them as soon as possible, but I pretended not to notice and endured it, gritting my teeth and letting Robert's family freely shop. I reminded myself that I'd be the one laughing in the end to get through these tough times. Then, 3 months after deciding to divorce, the day to act finally came. I'm tired. Please decide, it's either me or your family, I told Robert, presenting him with an ultimatum. He was surprised, but I continued without concern. None of your family members lift a finger to help around the house. They just dump all their chores on me. You know I work from home. I'm not just playing around. Yet they treat me like a freeloader and tell me to know my place since you're supporting me. I've had enough, I cried as I confronted Robert. He looked at me, smirked, and said, then you should leave. Didn't I tell you before? You're not really a part of this family yet. Giving up like this means you didn't earn your place in the family. I pretended to be shocked as I looked at Robert. What are you surprised about? If you can't live with my family, then you're the one who has to leave. Oh, and since I'm not at fault, I'll take this apartment as alimony and I'll take half of your savings as part of the property division. Ah, so that was his aim all along. That's why his whole family kept harassing me, trying to drive me out. I knew it, but hearing it outright was still a shock. This was someone I once loved and even married, but thanks to this, I made up my mind. Fine, I said, deciding to divorce Robert, but this condo is mine and I'm not at fault either. What did you say? Robert seemed shocked that I outright rejected his proposal, not expecting such a response. It made sense, as I had always complied with his demands. Since our marriage, thinking back on it made me angrier. I don't want to spend another second with you all, so I'll leave now, but you should also prepare to leave. It's a joke, right? This is our home, we won't leave. Ever heard of residential rights? You can't just force people out who live here, Robert shouted. Ignoring his ranting, I left the house and went to my grandparents' place. I explained everything and asked if I could stay until things were settled. My grandparents were shocked to learn what I had gone through and scolded me for not consulting them earlier. Tears in their eyes, they hugged me tightly. Grandma, Grandpa, I'm sorry for worrying you, but I'll be okay now. You know, I might look doyle, but I'm not really, I said with forced laughter, tears in my eyes. The day after I left the apartment, Robert contacted me right away. Hey, what's this all about? What are you referring to? I replied, the certified mail. I'm not paying any alimony and I'm not leaving the condo, just so you know, Robert declared. But legally, you have an obligation to pay, and you don't have the right to continue living in that apartment, I responded. What are you talking about? That apartment is mine too since we're married. If you insist, then pay me half its value to buy me out. Such an absurd claim. Talking like this is getting us nowhere. Please communicate through my lawyer from now on, I said, ending the call. I knew he would probably call again tomorrow, but I had no desire to talk anymore today. As expected, he called the next morning. Hey, what's this all about? He repeated the same line as yesterday. No creativity at all. What are you referring to? The card's not working. What did you do? What I did was cancel it. That card was mine, and you were just using the family card, remember? Indeed, before leaving the house, I had switched all the contracts from that card to another and canceled it. Of course, the family cards would stop working when I canceled mine. I was paying for it too. Yes, you paid the apartment's management fee and property taxes just for the first 2 months. It's not much, but I can deduct that from the alimony if you like, I mocked, hearing some indistinct shouting from the other end of the phone. Robert only paid the agreed amount for just 2 months. He made various excuses about the store and whatnot, always finding a reason to ask me to wait, but then he stopped paying altogether. If he forgot and thought he was still paying, that's some poor memory, but I didn't care anymore. He's someone I'm cutting ties with. His memory doesn't matter to me. That's the situation, so please pay your half of the living expenses I've been covering. I've kept a detailed household ledger, which I'll submit as evidence. Then divide the savings properly. It's marital property, he demanded. Yes, I understand. Let's split it accordingly, I agreed, and he ended the call with a parting shot, reminding me not to forget. A few days later, I got another call with the same line. I realized they lacked not only memory but vocabulary as well. What do you mean the split of shared property? Why is it zero? You must be rolling in cash from your parents' insurance and alimony. Ah, so that's what they were thinking. I patiently explained that my savings before marriage weren't part of the shared property, and since we had no savings after marriage, it naturally amounted to zero. Don't lie to me. If you think I'm lying, why don't you consult with someone? Anyway, from now on, please communicate through my attorney. I won't be speaking to you directly anymore. Goodbye, I said, then hung up the phone and blocked Robert's number. 2 months after I left the house, Robert and his family finally moved out of the apartment. Not because they had a change of heart, but because they couldn't sustain their living. Naturally, Robert's income alone wasn't enough for a family of 5. They were used to shopping extravagantly with my card. Telling them to cut back now was impossible. I had to let them use the card intentionally, knowing it would come to this. His family started pestering Robert for shopping money, and when he refused, they began stealing from his wallet. Even when Robert got mad, they blamed him for kicking me out. To top it off, the electricity, gas, and water were all shut off, something I had arranged since I had no plans to live there for a while. Robert tried to get them restored immediately over the phone, but since the house was in my name, no one else could get them reconnected if the owner had them stopped. During the hot summer and early fall, his family couldn't bear the extreme heat and eventually left the condo. Where they went, I neither know nor care. Robert tried to stay till the end but eventually gave up due to the lack of electricity and the inability to bathe. The divorce proceedings went faster than expected, not because Robert had a change of heart, but because he messed up. He cheated on me while we were still married, or rather, he had started making moves on someone, thinking he could kick me out soon. He bragged about owning a luxury apartment in a prime location downtown, luring young girls there. It's surprising he did this while his family was around, but he had a history of such behavior, so they didn't mind. He was handsome, so I suspected he might do such things. Before leaving, I had installed cameras in several places in the house, which captured all the evidence. Maybe he underestimated me, but he really did disrespect me. He brought his family into my home without my permission, made a family card, and left me the bill, kicked me out, and cheated on me. I demanded a hefty sum in alimony for all these. When Robert saw the amount, he turned pale and desperately pleaded for reconciliation, but I had no such intentions. Knowing he couldn't pay, I made him borrow as much as possible from his company and took whatever I could get. When I threatened to sue him for fraud over the family card, he reluctantly agreed to my terms. Well, I hope he does his best to pay off his debt. The divorce is finalized and I'm still staying at my grandparents' place. I haven't decided what to do with the apartment yet. I treasured it because my parents left it to me, but since they passed away when I was very young, and I have no memories of them, plus all this has happened, I think they understand if I let it go. My work as an illustrator is picking up, and I might live alone again. But for now, it's a good time to stay at my grandparents' place. I can work just fine from there. I'll depend on them a little longer, then move forward with strength. Next time, I won't be fooled by a man who's only good looking. I hope to find a partner I can truly share my life with, someone who values me for who I am, not for what I have.